Hi there, and thank you for joining us on the Overcomers Overcoming podcast. We feature those who are in the process of overcoming or have overcome any type of life encounter, life obstacle that at the time seemed to be almost insurmountable. With this podcast, we have three objectives in mind. Our first objective is we want you to know with a confident resolve you are not alone. We want to work with you. We want you to know there are others who are working with you, who want to help you through whatever you are encountering, and together we will get through whatever you're experiencing.
Our second objective is there are multiple options for any life encounter you are facing. We want to help you develop a resolve that there are various options and solutions to any life dilemma.
Our third objective is to help you with critical thinking skills. If you're encountering something that was possibly a decision you made sometime in the past, and if you had the opportunity for a life redo, you would make a different decision. We want to help you with those critical thinking skills that can help you make an informed decision and not encounter what you're going through at the moment. We are the Cooper Culture, a veteran-owned business. We work with business personnel and families to develop and sustain connected relationship cultures within their families and organizations. That type organization is one where people feel wanted, appreciated, and genuinely a part of that organization. I'm with my wife and business partner, Marty, who has helped me facilitate this podcast. Today we featured Janet Sherlund, who discusses adoption. It's a topic that can be controversial, it can be emotional, it can be a very loving topic that adoptive parents took on the responsibility of raising a child that was not biologically theirs. And we sometimes think that the adopted child just accepts everything. I've got loving adoptive parents and everything is going to proceed and move smoothly. But Janet talks about being abandoned at birth, and she wrote on this, but she talks about some of the challenges, some of the things that caused emotional disturbance for her, and it's something very poignant for every person to know how some, not necessarily all, but she felt as an adopted child. Marty, what are some takeaways our listeners and you gained from Janet's testimony?
Janet was very good about explaining how some, like you said, some feel abandoned. And I want to go back to the 9 months that a child is in the womb of a mother. Janet explains it that they listen, they learn, they know that voice. And then they're born, and 6 weeks is a very important time for a baby, being held by that mother. When that mother leaves, they're not held in the hospital because the nurses don't have the time. Then they are adopted and another voice comes up. We sometimes think, oh, children can't think in the womb, children don't learn, they're too young to understand when they're first born. But that's not true. Janet explains it so well and is so passionate about explaining what adoption and the trauma for some, not all, it can be a life journey.
It's a very moving experience knowing what she and very possibly others experience. She may be voicing what some other adopted children are feeling but have not verbalized. Let's listen and learn together. Janet, it's great to have you with us. Our listeners are going to be very interested in learning from you, your life experience about adoption. I'm certain many of our listeners have adopted children, and we may operate under the assumption that, yep, as long as I love them, everything should be fine and so forth. But you have a very unique, positive perspective on adoption that can be very useful to every one of us listening. Janet, it's great to have you with us.
Thank you so much. I appreciate our conversation and the opportunity to educate people more on the adoptee's point of view and the adoptee's perspective of adoption.
Janet, having lived as an adopted person and having gone through various life experiences, our listeners need to know you wrote a book entitled Abandoned at Birth, and there's a very deep, broad meaning behind that title. But maybe there's such a broad perspective of all this, but can you tell our listeners how it was that you felt abandoned, but then more importantly, it seems to me most importantly, how do we avoid having an adopted child feel abandoned? In other words, as close as we can be to feel as if they are a part of our biological family.
Well, that's the problem. They aren't, and they never will be. And what adoptive parents, I feel, have to support and understand and take the journey with their child is that an adopted child is someone else's child. You are raising someone else's child, and their DNA and their history and their heritage, they come to you with all of that intact, which doesn't share any genes or chemistry with yours and your experiences. They reflect other people and other lineages. And you have to accept that and be willing to raise someone else's child. I think you have to be open with them. They have to feel like who they are, what their authentic identity is, and where they came from is respected and valued. Because if it's not, then they aren't. And so I think being very open and honest, having these hard conversations, appreciating that as an adoptive parent, I know it must feel a little scarier. There must be a little more insecurity about that. This isn't your blood. There, members of a family all seem to have a birthright. They do have a birthright, but they often feel that birthright. And you'll support and stick up for your family member and help them because they're your blood and you care about them. You're all the same people, the same clan, so to speak. But an adopted child is from someone else's clan and other people. They don't have a birthright into your family. And no parent, adopted or not, has a right to expect love and loyalty from a child if they're not treated well. But let's assume that this is a happy adopted family and the children are loved and treated well. You've got to understand that your child can love more than one person. And just because they need to know who they are and where they came from does not negate their love or their loyalty to you or their gratitude. And one of the things I really have to say a lot to people is two things can be true at once. You can be grateful for your adoption and still have been traumatized by being adopted.
Wow.
You can love and be loyal to forever your adopted parents, but love isn't enough to fill a person with a sense of self and their identity and respect and being a happy and whole person. And so often adopted children suppress themselves and deny themselves and don't speak out and don't show their true colors because they're trying to be loved and cared for and have their adoptive family be loyal to them. And they're afraid to be who they really are, or they get the message that where they came from wasn't a good place or wasn't a valuable place. And I don't think it's possible to not feel abandoned as an adoptee. You were abandoned. Your blood, flesh and blood, gave you up and gave you to strangers. That's the whole cold, hard truth of it. So we need to accept that and then say, okay, that's a traumatic experience for a child who's in one mother's body for 9 months, hears her voice, feels her, smells her, knows her rhythms, then is handed to people that are completely different. And although they may be good people and love this child, there is a primal wound when when an infant is separated from the mother that it's been with for 9 months and felt and it's known as its life source and safety. And so you have to honor that and say, okay, how can I go on this journey with my child of helping them understand all we can about where they came from and who they look like and what their natural talents are and what is innate in them and what their heritage is that they should be proud of. And how can we walk with them instead of trying to say they're just like me, they, look how much they look like me, let's dress alike, let's do things, let's make them like my choices of in life. It's going on a journey with the adoptee, but never forgetting that they are somebody else. They're not a member of your family, no matter how much you love them and how much they love you.
Should we stay away from the word abandoned? You mentioned that every adopted child knows, feels they were abandoned, but does the word, even discussing the word, verbalizing the word abandoned, bring up maybe the very bad memories with the adopted child? And I'm I'm trying. I want to
Well,
be. I want to help
yeah.
our listeners and our granddaughters adopted. I want to
Mhm.
be very realistic, but yet I don't want to maybe trigger some sort of trauma.
Well, everyone's story is different of why they were placed for adoption. So I think just using the story and the circumstances and the facts is helpful. I use that word in my case because my birth mother wasn't happy to be pregnant. She didn't want anything to do with me. She didn't look at me. She couldn't wait to give me away. She just she had and which was unusual when I was adopted, and it was unusual when I finally was put in the care of an adoption agency. My records are just full of how odd and unusual they found her, that she just would have nothing to do with me or my care, just kept asking how soon she could sign the papers. So I've used that word purposely to show how disinterested, in my case, my birth mother was of about me, and then which of course played out in real life when I finally found her when I was in my late 50s, early 60s, and she still refused to meet me and have anything to do with me. So there was an emotional abandonment as well as a physical. It wasn't in a box on the side of the road, but I was, she had me and then just told the hospital basically to find some place to get rid of me. So it was an abandonment, both physical and emotional. But I think the words, yeah, I see what you're saying. You don't want to put words in a child's head, but I think you want to, as soon as they're old enough to understand, tell them the story of why they were relinquished. And now I know there are more open adoptions now, and there's more information often to share with adoptees, and I think that's great. It's still not the answer. I mean, you can talk to plenty of children who were raised in open adoption. They're not children anymore, adults who are raised in open adoption. And they still share these feelings, and they share, they have two sets of parents and that they're negotiating, but they still, you have to know both sides of yourself. We're complex beings. And those of you who are raised in your biological families, you saw yourself mirrored in relatives, parents, siblings, aunts and uncles, grandparents. And that's a very important part of child development. Anyone will tell you that and acknowledge that. And when you're adopted, you don't have that. You don't know anyone else in the world who looks like you. You don't feel tethered to anyone. You not only don't see anyone, you don't have anyone looking at you in that way. You're not looking at them. And you don't have any stories. The stories that your adopted parents are telling about their parents and your aunts and uncles, it's like you're hearing stories of nice people that you like, but they're not your stories. You know that you're not connected to those people. And so that's the other thing. There's a sort of like a hidden world in adoption. I think it's what's going on in the adoptee's mind and gut are very scary and very different from what they will tell their parents or allow themselves to speak, because they don't want to offend their adoptive parents. They don't want to hurt them. And also because it's too easy for adoptees to blame themselves. Like, I feel sad, or I feel weird, or I think about where I came from a lot. But boy, my parents love me and they're really nice and nothing bad's happening to me. This must be something wrong with me. And so you don't talk about it, but it's there. I have yet to meet any adoptee who denies what they were experiencing. And when those of us who are telling the truth about this and speaking out talk, they're just flooded with, oh my God, yes. Oh my God, yes. Oh, I never told anyone that. Yes, that's how I felt. And so there's such relief in talking to other adoptees and having this experience affirmed, because you go through life thinking you're nuts. what's wrong with me, instead of there's something wrong with a system that's designed to protect children, but in fact protects the needs of the parents. They're protecting the needs and the insecurity of the adoptive parents, and they're protecting the $1 billion-a-year adoption industry to find enough babies to sell to other people. So there's, it seems like the adoptee themselves is the least important part of how we do adoption right now. And I think we need to change that.
You seem to be saying when the adopted child is of the appropriate age, and it's maybe less so the chronological age as it is the mental maturity age, it is good to have an open conversation about and maybe let them use whatever word they want, whether it's abandon or whatever. But you went through what, nearly 50 years of life or so until
More
you
so.
were hoping to get that closure. You never did. And I'm curious, Janet, did you just wonder what your worth was for maybe even 50 years or so? That your
Yeah.
biological mom just, I'm going to use the word trashed me. And I
Yeah.
hope I'm not trying to be offended, but I'm not trying to overemphasize anything, but I can envision maybe you felt that way.
I think it's hard not to as an adoptee, no matter what you're told. There are all sorts of cliche now lines that adoptees are given. Oh, your mother loved you so much she gave you away. And as a kid, you're going, someone loved me so much they abandoned me, huh? That doesn't make any sense. So, a lot of the statements that are made to you as an adoptee just don't ring true to us. That's not our experience. And so, yes, you're given away, not even anyone in the family. I'm a firm supporter of kinship adoption. So adoptee at least stays in their genetic, can see themselves in other people and know about themselves. But you think my mother, that primal connection in life, gave me away, gave me away to an agency or someone who assigned me to anybody in the world, like whatever. And nowadays, if it's more the birth mother chose them, yes, great. But let's face it, they aren't seeing the real life. No one sees a real life of someone who's trying to sell themselves to a birth mother. So my birth mother, my birth family gave me away. It's very hard to not feel less than and worthless and not important. And you carry that through life. And again, love, all the love in the world isn't enough to fix that. And it's something that you have to kind of come to terms with. And you need help doing that. And so you have to come to terms. We all struggle to form a sense of self as we grow up. Adolescence is tough on everybody. And of course, every family, there's no perfect family. I mean, that's another myth of adoption. We're giving this baby to a better family, quote unquote. No family is without issues. No family is without problems of, mental health or addiction or anger or poverty. I mean, there's just no family that exists without those things. So the child's going to have to face stuff at some point in their life. But they need help. As an adopted person, you need to come to grips with two people, the biological you and the adopted you. And you need help doing that. So it would be so helpful if your parents could recognize, acknowledge, and respect the biological you, and give you any tools you might need to, and then integrate those both. The biological you and the adopted you. You have the biological you, but you don't share memories with that family. If you're, unless you're in an open adoption, you share some memories, but in your adoptive family, you don't share blood with those people. You don't have that sense of being truly connected and like one of them, or we all look alike, we're one together. And so you kind of have a foot in two families or two identities. And you appreciate the opportunities and the love you had in your adoptive family, if you were so lucky to have that kind of adoptive family. But the other half of you is this other piece that's so often in adoption hidden or put away or spoke of as something less than. But when you speak of your child's origins as being less than, you're telling them they're less than. So it's so important to, but it's also important, and especially when an individual's older and can handle this. I don't care how bad the story is behind a child's origins. They need to know that, because they need to know the good, the bad, and the ugly in themselves, just like all of you, and I'm speaking of non-adopted people, know it in your own families. Is there addiction? Is there mental health issues? You better know that so that you can be on the watch for that in yourself, or get help if you need it. Um, and you need to know the bad traits you have, bad personality traits, so that you can go, okay, well, I like, let's keep a lid on that. So, and also celebrate things that you might have been given by birth that aren't in your adoptive family, and you finally see, a whole line of people that enjoyed, they're musicians or they're artists or they're chemists or they're doctors, something very different from what you grew up in your adoptive family, and that should be celebrated. So it's so important to understand how traumatic it is to be adopted, how broken an individual is when they are adopted, and to instead work so hard to support them. Adoptees have 4 times the suicide rate and are well overrepresented in mental health, in hospitalizations for mental health and addiction. I mean, this is trauma. And so let's try and prevent that. And what do we need in order to do that? And it's focused more on, what does an individual growing up with this fractured life need to be as whole and integrated as they can be?
I want to ask you a generalized statement. Would it be good for the adoptive parents to learn the whereabouts of the biological parents, maybe make contact with them to determine, and let's say legally, I think I'm using the right terms, there is an open adoption. And what I'm referring to, even if not, I'm not using the right terms, the biological parents have a right to at least know the whereabouts of their biological child. Is it your life experience it's good to have the adoptive parents learn the whereabouts of the biological parents? And then the second part of this question is, let's assume you know the whereabouts, you have spoken with, and yes, there is agreement to meet. Is it good or generally not good to have the adoptive parents there, or is that extremely individualized?
Well, first of all, one of the things I was really shocked to learn in the past year or so was that open adoption in our country today, it may be more often practiced, but it is not legally binding. And I was shocked to learn that in more cases than not, when an open adoption is agreed to at birth, it is often ended by the adoptive parents, by no choice of the biological parents, at their whim at some point in their child's life. And until their child is then 18, they are really kept from the biological family. So it's again, we have the adoptive parents calling all the shots here and not understanding what their child needs. Yes, I think it's important for a child to know their biological family. Yes, I think it's important for them to see them and interact with them, because that's where they learn who they are. And no, I wouldn't have wanted my adoptive parents. I mean, at one point I fantasized that they could all get together and be together, but I think it'd be too uncomfortable for everybody. I think the adoptee and the biological parents should have a chance to be themselves and not have the eyes of the adoptive parents, glaring at them. That's got to be rough for the adoptive parents too. I understand it's scary. I understand you feel threatened, but guess what? That's what adoption is. Like, you just have to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and do what's best for your child and not for your own insecurity. And so I think it's critical, in my experience of life, and I know my sisters and many, many, many other adoptees. There's a whole world of adoptees speaking out, in online communities, and we all saying the same thing. We didn't make sense to ourselves. We didn't know who we were, and we thought very poorly of ourselves. And meeting our biological halves, you know, healed us as much as possible, gave us more sense of self and more peace than we had known without it. And then, not that it's not hard after that. Again, you're dealing with a lot. You're dealing with 2 parts of your life, 2 different identities, and that's a lot. And that's why I not only read a lot and studied in school, but I've had lots of therapy. And I would urge that for anybody. It's a hard thing to do, and there's a lot to understand, and there's a lot to work through. And I also want to acknowledge that for adoptive parents, they've lost their genetic futures too when they can't have their own children, and there's a lot of sorrow and grief there that they have to deal with and work through. There's so much sorrow and grief in adoption, and sort of on all sides and certainly the biological family too. There's just a lot of sorrow and grief in it. It's not a hallmark thing. It's not a happy thing. Sometimes it's necessary to find a home for a child. We shouldn't be commoditizing children like we are. But when it's necessary, I think it has to be done with eyes wide open, because the people being hurt are the adoptees. And we just have to do better. We shouldn't have those kind of high suicide rates and illnesses caused by, I mean, it's hard to imagine, but you're just separated from every connection to life, every connection to safety and birthright, and you're sort of floating in this world, and you're being given a name that you know wasn't the name you were born with. And so everything about your life feels so capricious. You know this wasn't your real name, but yet you're being asked to go through life with this name, and often playing to the traditions and ethnic traditions of the adoptive family instead of your own. And they may be nice and interesting, but it all feels false. It all feels borrowed. And how horrible to go through life feeling tentative and borrowed, and like everything about you is capricious.
I want
And
to
when
try
you
to
finally
project
meet your
myself.
biology, I think you learn where you belong and where you came from. And then
Sure.
you can launch from there.
I want to try to project myself as the infertile mother who adopted for that reason. And the adopted child is at an age where they can meet their biological parents. The infertile mother may be very uncertain if the adopted child may give up on the adopted parents and say, we've reconciled. I do want to go back. I want to give up my adopted parents and live with my biological parents. Do you have any statistics? Do you know how, I mean, is that a
I
real rarity, or what are we
Yes,
talking about?
from what I understand, that's very rare. That's extremely rare. And first of all, a couple things here. Number one, the biological parent would also want that to happen. Often their life has moved on and changed, and that's not the case. Um, but I also have to respond to that to say, and if that's the case, then you're going to have to let go and let that happen, because you've been borrowing this child. This child isn't yours to own. And so I understand the insecurity, but that's one of the realities you have to accept when you adopt. But any parent, even your biological child, oftentimes we hear stories of biological teenagers or whatever. I don't love you anymore. I'm going to go live with my friends or someone else I like, or another relative. Or if there's a case of divorce, they want to live with one parent, not the other. I mean, this happens at certain stages in life and families. And so, and it's difficult when anyone has to face that. But that fundamental insecurity of adoptive parents, that they might lose the child at some point, I argue that that's very rare. And if you are a loving and good parent, you will never lose your child. That they know also that you were the one there for them, and you were raising them, and you were there when they were sick and helping them through everything. And they love you, and they're loyal to you, and they are capable of loving you and someone else at the same time. You can love multiple people. So can your child. And certainly as they grow to be young adults and adults. And so the industry shouldn't be captive to assuring the adoptive parents. We should be more saying, what does that child need? What do they need when they're facing this very difficult situation of being asked to live two different lives, or having the life they know to be their biological cellular life hidden from them or taken from them? And there's resentment there too at times, like no one asked me. Like I wanted to be born, or I wanted to be adopted, but it happened to me. How, the people in my life should help me then figure out what I need to not live in a state of constant anxiety and grief and loss. And so I know those are difficult situations, but no more difficult and no more challenging for those parents than the lives they're asking their adopted child to live.
Let's bring this in for a landing, and I want to ask you to reflect on your life and as it may apply to the adopted parents. You went through several decades of just trying to rationalize your life and so forth. And what I'm going to do is ask you to project for those parents and so forth that retrain you are very well adjusted right now, but it took several decades for you to, I'm going to use the term, reconcile your past. And I think you're saying, and this is a part of a question, if you had been able to have a very meaningful conversation with your adoptive parents much earlier, maybe you could have lived a much better life earlier on. And I'm at a point, Janet, I'm not even sure how to phrase my question. I hope you can understand where I'm trying to ask on
Yeah,
behalf of the listeners.
I do think that. I think it would have been such a relief to me to have my parents say, "We understand this is really hard for you, and we know you must wonder about this other mother you have out there and this other family. And gosh, we may not be able to understand that, but we love you, and our job is to help you navigate life. And what can we do to help? Even just to listen, even to be able to have a conversation, saying, gee, I wonder who I really look like. I wonder, what ethnicity I am. Or just to have them acknowledge what I was really suffering with internally and privately because I didn't think it was appropriate. I was so worried about hurting them. I didn't write my book until my adoptive parents had died, and they lived to be 96. So it was a long time, and I didn't want to hurt them. It's very difficult. Your life is not only taken from you emotionally or physically, but as an adoptee, you're so worried about pleasing other people and fitting in that you are not whole and you're not real, and you can't develop when you can't be real. And so it would have been a real relief to have that acknowledgement and maybe to even wonder together. And then it would have been nice at some point. And I remember wishing this, it didn't happen, but I wished that my biological parents and adoptive parents could have met. Um, but yes, to answer your question, feeling like your adoptive parents respect who you truly are and are on this journey with you instead of you are fixing their infertility and you are making them happy, and that's your role in life, and it shouldn't be what a child's born to be.
Janet, Marty, and I applaud you for the life you have led in knowing you wrote the book, published the book after your adopted parents passed away because you wanted to tell the story as you experienced it, but did not want to hurt them. It's a tribute to the way you think and the person you are. And Marty, what do you think?
I just have a comment and a thank you to you. Adoptive parents, you mentioned that the child learns everything about the mother basically in the womb. They are learning while they're in, and I think we as people, we don't understand that. We think, hey, they're in the womb, they can't hear, they can't do. No, they can. So they get used to this mother, and they go into the hospital, and they're born, and then the mother never holds them.
Yeah.
So I
and,
think
and
it's good to know that they learn in the womb.
they do. Babies are not blank slates, which is the premise of adoption. Like, oh, they don't know anything, they don't care who it is, so long as someone loves them. But we're not blank slates when we're born. And also, we have something in all of us as human beings that we don't really understand or talk about, but it's just this almost cellular understanding of your blood and your kin. Like you feel like you belong there when you meet them. It's this physical feeling of just comfort and relaxation and being understood. It's different than the feeling you have around, say, friends, even close friends who you love and are with, but you don't feel that same connection to them. And that's how you feel all the time in your life as an adoptee. You never, ever get the feeling of being connected and being a part of a bigger group. You are always alone. And that's a horrible thing. So, and love can't bridge that. It can really help, but it can't take it away. And so we have to understand that babies are not blank slates, and babies certainly understand a stranger's arms versus their blood's arms.
Thank you, Janet. Do
Thank
you
you.
reach out to counsel with, coach adoptive parents?
I have not been doing that. I've been talking. I've been on a lot of podcasts and talking and wrote the book in hopes that people would try and could be able to get a little glimpse into what that big black hole is in adoptees. And there are a lot of resources out there, and now there are a lot of great therapists out there who specialize in adoption. And I think, I mean, I'm always happy to talk to people, but that's, I'm not qualified in any professional way to do that, but just hoping that by talking about this raises awareness, and hopefully people can find resources. On my website, I also have a lot of resources.
Janet, thank you for your life, your book, Abandoned at Birth. Thank you for being willing to reach out and help adoptive children, adoptive parents to understand each other better. And the more we understand each other, I think the healthier mentally we will be with each other. Thank you so much
Absolutely.
for your life.
Thanks for the conversation.
We appreciate having the opportunity to share our and our guests' life's experiences with you.
The Cooper Culture advances organizations to achieve and sustain high retention rates, connected communication, and trust through personality insights and principled leadership. You can contact us at our website, thecooperculture.com, and you can contact us directly at ron@thecooperculture.com or Marty, M-A-R-T-Y, at thecooperculture.com. We work with you to help assess aspects of your culture to advance the environment and people to their best performance. We do that through our staff of certified personal performance coaches, leadership trainers, keynote speakers, and disc personality behavior experts. You can book a speaking engagement directly through our website by contacting us at ron@thecooperculture.com. We look forward to sharing our life experiences with you, some of which are profound, some of which are pretty funny. Some of those life experiences are ones we'll never do that again because we've been through stuff. We truly look forward to working with you, speaking with you, helping advance you in any way that we can.